UFC Fight Night, Reyes versus Procházka, aka UFC Vegas 25. Welcome to another UFC prediction and analysis video. He goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. We are Boxing MMA Picks, and we're here to give you some more UFC breakdown, UFC fight by fight analysis, letting you know from the betting perspective which fights do you want to avoid, which fights are definitely worth the money, perhaps which underdogs we may be looking at. And hey, if you even stick to the end of this video, you might get some entire card parlay action. You don't want to miss that. We do have 6 fights on this main card. Dominick Reyes versus Jiri Prochazka being the main event. But before we get to the main event, let's of course get into fight number 1. We have Poliana Botelho versus Luana Carolina. And I'll start this one off. I'll keep this one relatively short, and I'll let you know right away that I do like Poliana Botelho in this fight. Both fighters are coming off of losses. Carolina is kind of that Muay Thai style fighter. She's a southpaw. She fights very tall, even though she will be the shorter fighter in this one at 5'6". She fights from the outside. The Thai clinch is okay. She has knees and elbows in the Thai clinch in general. I don't think she has the best striking defense. Although she won her UFC debut versus Priscilla Kohara, she showed really suspect takedown defense in that fight. Striking defense in that fight, especially early. And the fight versus Ariane Lipski, that exposed her ground game in that fight. That was, of course, her most recent fight. Lipski won that fight from a nasty knee bar. That was only 9 months ago. So let's see how the leg has healed up. I feel like that's going to be an additional X factor in this fight. Poliana Botelho, she did lose to Jillian Robertson in her last fight. Jillian was very effective on the ground, as we would expect Jillian Robertson to be. I don't think the ground game is going to be a factor in this fight. I think this fight is going to stay on the feet. Interesting to note, though, if Luana has some kind of ground game that I'm completely unaware of. Botelho did show some takedown defense in that Jillian Robertson fight. She stuffed the first couple of attempts. She showed her physical strength. She showed kind of some ground game ability of her own. But obviously, Jillian's relentless style was just a little bit too much for her. On the striking side of things, though, because I think that that's where this fight will stay. Poliana Botelho, very big striker, very explosive striker. She sits on her punches. Physically, she's very strong, and she's a Muay Thai fighter as well. So I think this is going to be a Muay Thai fight. I really just don't believe Luana Carolina's level of skill is that high. I'll be honest with you. I don't think she has the tools to beat Botelho in this one. I think Botelho is the better fighter, the more well-rounded fighter, the more explosive striker. I can't find a reason for her to lose this one.
Yeah, yeah, this is definitely one of those fights where got to be careful with, because these are 2 women. One's 27 in Luana Carolina, and Botelho's 32. So these they're different ages, different style of fighting. We really don't know what's gonna come fight night. We really don't know. Like, Luana Carolina can come out here and knock out Botelho. On the other side, Botelho can come out here and knock out Carolina. I wouldn't be surprised with either outcome, just because, to me, both of their games they don't have a dominant game. So when they're in fights, these fights look closer than they should be. And when I look at Carolina, she's a bit green to me. She's more green to me. Botelho, she's definitely UFC level. She's been in there with some good UFC fighters. What I think is going to happen here is Botelho may have success in the stand-up. I think she's the better striker. But again, these girls are wild. They're just going to be thrown with their eyes closed, so you never know. But I think where Botelho is going to be dominant here is when she has her against the cage. And she's really good at holding her opponent against the cage and actually just letting off like 10 knees. Like, she's really good at that. She's very active. When she has you against the cage, she's hard to get away from. And she gets the underhooks. If you have her back against the cage, she gets the underhook. She's really persistent on that. And then she turns you around, and then she lets go like 10 knees, right? So she's very active. She's going to get a lot of points there. I think this is her fight. So I'm going to go Luana here to win this fight. I'm sorry. I'm going to go Botelho, Poliana Botelho to win this fight. I just think that when they get to the cage, I think she's going to be able to hold her against the cage like Holly Holm and do damage there. I think she's going to be able to just hug her there, throw some knees. I think Botelho's going to be able to get some takedowns in there. I think she's going to get some takedowns. I see it. So I like this spot for Botelho here because I don't think that Carolina's going to have an answer when she's getting roughed up against the cage. So that's my pick, Botelho.
Sounds good to me. Let's move on to fight number 2. We have Merab Dvalishvili versus Cody Stamann. How do you feel about this one?
Man, I'll be quick, man. Merab is my pick to win this fight. There's levels when it comes to this wrestling. I know Cody is the better striker. Cody has some wrestling as well. He comes from a wrestling background. But I think this Merab is just a different level. If you watch PFL, it was Lance Palmer versus Bubba Jenkins, and Bubba Jenkins won a national title. And he beat Lance Palmer 3 times, lost once to Lance Palmer in wrestling in college. When they fought last week, it showed like there's levels to the wrestling. He just out-wrestled him. He beat Lance Palmer, who hasn't lost in years, right? So this is going to be a similar fight here. This is going to be a fight where they both can wrestle. Cody might be the slightly better stand-up striker, but I think with Merab's pressure and threat of the takedown, Merab is going to be the more effective striker on fight night because I think Cody's going to have to worry about Merab closing distance, getting the body locker. Merab can take you down anyway. I don't know what he is. If he's freestyle, if he's Greco, because I see it all. I see freestyle takedowns. I see freestyle entries. I see Greco takedowns. So I'm not really sure. But one thing I will say is that there's levels. And I think we're going to see the difference here, American and that Georgian wrestling here. And I think that Merab's on a higher level. And I think that he's just going to out-wrestle him for 3 rounds.
Yeah, I'll keep it short as well. I'm going with Merab Dvalishvili in this one as well. And I do think the key to this fight is going to be pace, right? Again, to your point, the idea here is that Cody Stamann will have the better stand-up. The idea here is that Merab will have the better wrestling, despite Cody Stamann being a very well-rounded fighter and possessing some really good wrestling of his own. Cody Stamann kind of fluctuates up and down between 145 and 135. This is a fight taking place at 135. I don't think size will be a factor here. I think Merab is pretty big for the 135 division, so I'm not worried about Cody Stamann necessarily being bigger. They're the same height. Merab has a 4-inch reach advantage, so again, I don't see that being a factor at all in case anyone was potentially concerned there. And again, I think the key to this fight is going to be pace. Cody Stamann's one of those, I want to be in a technique type of fight. I want to be at a slower pace. I want to be at a more quote unquote high IQ type of pace. Whereas Merab, he just comes forward at all times. So I think, eventually that's going to get too much of Stamann. I think we might be looking at a relatively close first round. But I think as round 2 and round 3 goes by, you're looking at a Merab who is going to win 29-28 on maybe 1 or 2 scorecards and might win 30-27 on another scorecard. So I'm going Merab all the way on this one. I think his pace is going to be too much, and he's going to be my pick for this fight versus Cody Stamann. Let's move on to fight number 3. We have Sean Strickland versus Krzysztof Jotko. I'll start with this one. Sean Strickland, really solid striker, especially since coming back. I know he took some time off. He fights pretty tall. The hands are pretty controlled. Never really throwing any looping punches or punches that are out of control. I really like that about him. He doesn't really waste any effort. The punches, again, they're real controlled. The jab is really good. Good counter puncher. He has sharp hands, sharp combinations. A lot of his punches have some sting on them as well. You can hear them, and you can just see how his opponents react. We saw decent top position out of him in his last fight versus Brendan Allen. Showed some really good clinch work in that fight as well. And he took Brendan Allen's back a few times. So he shows that additional factor to his game. He's not just a striking artist or a stand-up artist by any means. If I'm looking at Krzysztof Jotko, he is a southpaw. Another orthodox versus southpaw matchup. He has good in and out movement, Jotko. Pretty light on his feet, and he's definitely going to fight from the outside. So right away I can see, Strickland marching him down. I can see Jotko circling the cage, and that kind of being the dynamic for most of this fight. Jotko does have some decent strikes from distance with both hands and feet. So he has that diversity to his game. I do see him on the back foot a lot, doesn't really like to engage. So that's going to be interesting in the eyes of the judges here. He can definitely clinch. I mean, we saw him use that as a key to victory in some of his fights. You know, you watch his Marc-Andre Barriault fight, and he used that clinch very effectively. But ultimately, I think this is going to be a stand-up match, right? I think it's going to stay on the feet. I think Strickland's combinations, I think his counter punches, I think his, I don't want to say pressure. I don't feel he's always marching you down, but I feel with this fight dynamic, he is going to be the fighter that is controlling center. He is going to be the fighter that is pressing forward, getting Jotko against the cage, perhaps, you know, landing a couple of strikes, looking for counterpunch opportunities, really making Jotko uncomfortable in there. So I'm going to go with Sean Strickland on this one. I like him. I like him in this one for sure.
Yeah, this is a battle of some good records here. 22-3 for Strickland, Jotko 22-4. So we're getting some high level. We're getting some high level fights here. A high level fight here. But one thing that I like about Strickland in this spot is that I think he's a better striker. I think he's going to be able to keep this on the feet. I think for Strickland to lose, he has to get knocked out. I don't think Jotko has that power. That to me is the biggest thing in this fight is that Jotko, he doesn't really knock people out at this level. He really doesn't do it, right? So the last person he knocked out at this level was Tamden McCrory. That was back in 2016. So he hasn't really knocked out someone at this level, right? So I really like Strickland in the spot. I just think at this point in their career, I think Strickland is the more well-rounded guy, the more dangerous guy, the harder hitter. And I think he would be the one that takes it to the ground if he wants to. I think he would be the one to take Jotko down. So arguably, I think Strickland's better everywhere. So I'm going to go Sean Strickland here, and I like him in this spot. I think this is a fight that he can shine in.
Yeah, definitely. And that minus 240, you know, I wish that would come down a little bit, maybe minus 220, minus 210. But I do like Sean Strickland in that spot as well. Let's move on to fight number 4. In that case, we have Yuan Cutelaba versus Dustin Jacoby. This is going to be one of those fights where you can't really confidently trust either guy. I'll be honest with you. This fight, to me, will definitely stay on the feet. You know, you have the bigger, more explosive striker in Cutelaba versus the tactical striker who's going to accumulate more points with Dustin Jacoby. With Cutelaba, though, it's interesting with him is that, you know, you got to feel he's probably fighting for his job in some ways, right? He's coming off of 2 losses. He's only 27 years old. And this is a 205 division that's relatively wide open. So, you know, he has to feel that hunger that he really has to pull this one out here, or he can, you know, that's really going to crush him in terms of ranking or even his safety on the roster in the UFC in general. I do think he's a UFC fighter, but again, you can't accumulate 2 losses. You can't accumulate too many losses at this level, or you will get cut pretty quick. You know, both fighters do have a path to victory here, in my opinion. I think Cutelaba, again, he's the bigger striker. He can land something very explosive early in the fight. I think he can incorporate a ground game like we saw him do versus Khalil Roundtree, where he knew Roundtree was going to be a dangerous striker, and he used that ground game to be really effective against Roundtree. Whereas Dustin Jacoby, you know, his path to victory, if he can survive that early onslaught and, you know, essentially outpoint Cutelaba the rest of the way, right? Kind of Daniel Rodriguez style in some ways. You know, Cutelaba to me is also very hittable, and you know, with how big his strikes are, it leaves him even more open to be countered or to be, you know, sort of take one and give up, you know, 4 or 5 if you're Dustin Jacoby in terms of outpointing him. So I mean, this one's going to be interesting. Again, I think Jacoby can also land something precise and accurate on Cutelaba to knock him out. You know, Jacoby does have a number of knockouts on his resume, so we're not going to act like he doesn't have that power, right? So, you know, ultimately, I do think in some ways this is a coin flip fight. Again, I think both fighters have, you know, somewhat of a legitimate path to victory here, but I just have to go with the fighter who I feel is more, you know, technically sound on the feet and potentially offers me more on the feet rather than going for sort of the puncher's chance. So I'm going Dustin Jacoby on this one. Slight underdog at plus 110, but he's going to be my pick.
Yeah, I think this is a real hard fight. I think this is 50-50 here because if Cutelaba comes out like you fought Khalil Roundtree, then Jacoby's in trouble because I don't think Jacoby can fight off that grappling. I don't think he can fight off from his back, get back to his feet here with that big guy on top of you. So I think this is a fight that Cutelaba could win this fight if he fights smart. And I think that if he utilizes that grappling, I think he will win this fight. I really do. But it's hard with this guy. Like, it's hard to know what he's going to do in this fight. It's hard to know if he's really going to go in there. And we also got to figure out if he's really even going to get the takedowns that easy. So that's not guaranteed, right? So if Jacoby's working on his takedown defense, I think the heavy work with the leg kicks early on in the fight. Jacoby loves to kick the legs. He's a better striker. He's going to be fighting. He's going to be striking straight versus Cutelaba's going to be more looping with his punches. I'm going to go with the straighter, tighter punches, the tighter combos, hoping he can just keep this on his feet. But again, this is a fight I want no part of as far as betting because I really feel like Cutelaba can come out here and get the grappling going. I think Jacoby's in trouble. But if he doesn't get the grappling going, I got to go with the kickboxer. I got to go with the guy that has the better stand-up. He's been in kickboxing. He did well in kickboxing. He should be able to, or he definitely has the edge in the stand-up. So if he doesn't get the takedowns here, I think Cutelaba is going to lose this fight here. I'm going to go with the underdog as well. Just banking on that he has tighter striking. Jacoby, since he came back from kickboxing, he's been a different fighter. This is not the same guy that was in the UFC years ago. This is somebody different that tuned into their striking, and they literally got way better than they were before with that striking. So I think he's on a different level with the striking. I think he's one of the better strikers in the division, and I think he should be able to win the striking match if it stays on the feet. So I'm going to go with Dustin Jacoby.
Agreed. Let's move on in that case to our co-main event of the evening. We have Cub Swanson versus Giga Chikadze. This is a real interesting one, of course. Cub Swanson, what seems like for a number of years, still playing that sort of gatekeeper role. And Giga Chikadze is a fighter who has wanted bigger fights, and here is definitely a bigger fight for him, and he's the favorite at minus 200. So let's kind of see how he performs. Now, when I break down these fights, looking at Cub Swanson first, he's on a 2-fight winning streak. So he's still winning at this age, at this level. 27-11, a lot of professional fights, a lot of damage taken in fights. We know who Cub Swanson is at this point. Good win in his last fight versus Daniel Pineda. Daniel Pineda was chopping him with the calf kick, and Cub Swanson he maintained his IQ and hurt Pineda and ended up finishing the fight. Showed a lot of heart in that one and showed a lot of will to win. You definitely have to respect his stand-up at this point in his career. He's going to be that guy that's moving around the cage, using in and out movement, changing pace. Veteran fight IQ, right? Always trying to make a read on you while making it difficult to try to make a read on him. Pretty well-rounded. We know he can grapple. We know he has some wrestling. Just a well-rounded veteran, obviously, at this stage in his career. Giga Chikadze, on the other hand, he's 5-0 in the UFC. He's competed in Glory Kickboxing, so we have a couple of pure kickboxers on this card. And his style is considered to be a combination of kickboxing and karate, just to kind of give you an idea of what to expect from him. Very sharp kicks. He showed a very effective calf kick in his win versus Omar Morales. And obviously that calf kick is going to be a factor in this Cub Swanson fight. I think Cub Swanson had an ACL tear or injury a number of years ago, if I remember correctly. So that's always been kind of a focal point for his opponents. And again, we saw Daniel Pineda use that very effectively versus Cub Swanson. Cub Swanson's leg went out. It's just Pineda couldn't get the job done. I do think Chikadze gets the job done here. Like I said, Cub, he's played that gatekeeper role for a while. I think, this is some form of that. Definitely a step up in competition for Chikadze. So it's always interesting to see how a fighter performs when he is facing a higher level fighter, sometimes they don't always come to the show, right? So I don't expect that from Chikadze. I do think he'll be prepared. I do think he'll be ready. Again, I think, he's a pure kickboxer in my eyes. He's competed in Glory. I think he'll be the better one on the feet here. I don't think Swanson will use a ground game against him. I don't think he'll really be able to take him down. And ultimately, I'm looking for Chikadze to be better on the feet here. That height, that reach, I'm looking for those to be a problem. And Chikadze has some sting on his punches. We might see Cub go out here.
Yeah, I'm not gonna take long here. I like Giga Chikadze as well here. When I look at Giga Chikadze here, he outstruck Omar Morales, made him look really, really bad. And Omar Morales has really high level striking. I think Giga Chikadze is top 5 in the featherweight division when it comes to pure striking, maybe top 3. I think he's that good. I'm really high on this guy's striking. He's training out of King's MMA, so he's definitely working with high level guys every day. Cub Swanson. Now, I think his time's up here. He's gonna have to get this fight to the ground. But Giga, again, he's working on his takedown defense, 70% takedown defense. And he's obviously working on that. He's working to improve that all the time, right? Because he knows if this fight stays standing, he likely beats a lot of the people in this division if he's able to avoid the grappling. So he's someone to look at in the future here. He's definitely is someone that has a good future in the UFC here. I think in this fight, he's going to be the stronger guy physically. He's going to be able to avoid the takedowns, keep this on the feet, as Harris said. And he 100% has the better striking. So I think he might get a finish here. So let's see. But I'm going to go Giga Chikadze here. I just think that I don't think Cub Swanson's wrestling is that good to forget about the big gap in the striking that Chikadze has over Cub, right? So you got to factor that in. If Cub had better wrestling and better grappling, then this would be a closer match. But I think Chikadze can stuff some of those Cub takedowns, keep this on the feet, and yeah, he's just gonna outstrike him. So yeah, I got Giga in this fight.
Yeah, agreed. And to your point with Cub not being, a specialist on the ground per se, one takedown a fight, 50% takedown accuracy. So again, I see Chikadze having no problem stuffing those, as he is the physically stronger fighter in this fight. So again, this one stays on the feet. Chikadze all the way on this one. Let's move on in that case to our main events of the evening. We have Dominick Reyes, the former title contender, versus Jiri Prochazka. Obviously a big step up in competition for him as well. How do you feel about this one?
Man, I think this is a wild fight. I think this is a fight you got to be careful of, because when you look at these two fighters, I think that Dominick Reyes has arguably the more technical striking. He arguably is the better fighter here. But there's something about this Jiří guy. He has too much power. He has 24 knockouts out of 27 wins. This guy's finishing people. He has that touch of death. And in a 5-round fight, I think at some point he's going to get the knockout. I know he's fought in Ryzen, so I know that in Ryzen, the rounds are longer than, I think they're longer than the 15 minutes, right? So he's definitely aware or able to handle longer fights, this being a 5-round fight. I don't think cardio is going to be an issue for this guy. This fight's going to stay on the feet. I don't think either guy's going to utilize grappling in this fight. And I think that Reyes, he tends to kind of trade. You hit me, I hit you, right? So he tends to do that. And I think Prochazka has too much power coming back. This guy finishes 24 out of 27 guys, right? And that's a crazy knockout percentage, right? So I'm going to go Jiri Prochazka. I just think at some point, even though he's not technically the better striker, technically the better fighter here, I just think this guy's throwing hammers back. It's like he's fighting with a weapon in his hand. And I think that I don't think Reyes is going to be able to take those shots. So I'm going to go Prochazka to win that fight.
Yeah, I can definitely see Prochazka putting him to sleep. I mean, again, that knockout percentage is just way too high for it not to be a threat here. What's interesting about this fight, Dominick Reyes, we see is the number 3 light heavyweight in the world. Jiri Prochazka, number 5 light heavyweight in the world. I think Reyes is kind of doing everything he possibly can to protect his ranking here. I mean, we saw him go up against John Jones. You know, a lot of people felt he had moments against John Jones. We saw him go up against Jan Blachowicz, who, you know, was kind of a slow pace fight until Blachowicz eventually put him out and you know, knocked him out. But, you know, he's at a really interesting crossroads in his career. I feel like if he loses this, it kind of puts him in, you know, Tyron Woodley land from a perspective of, okay, you're no longer getting a top 5 type of guy to challenge anymore. Now you're going to face the guys between 6 and 10. And if you lose between a guy between 6 and 10, now you're completely out of the top 10. So I think he's in a really interesting position where, not that he's fighting for his job, but he's definitely fighting to protect his ranking. And I think that could bring some sort of X factor out in him that I just kind of feel it in my gut in terms of that. To your point, I do think Reyes will be the technically better striker here. But one thing I'll point out in this fight that might make the difference, Jiri Prochazka, he has a lot of antics in his fight. It's very interesting to watch because if you watched his fight versus Volkan Ozdemir, Ozdemir had him hurt in round 1, and it came from showboating that Prochazka was doing. I think even in the, I might be wrong here, the CB Dalloway fight, I think there was moments where Prochazka for a moment was showboating a bit, and then you know, his opponent looked good until, to your point, touch of death, CB Dalloway was bouncing off of the mat because he was knocked out cold. So, you know, in some ways, the showboating is concerning to me. In other ways, he still knocks people out anyway. So in some ways, I don't really know which way to go in this fight. You know, I want to go X Factor. What I will say is this. I'm not betting on this at all. I'm not even going to consider betting this fight. I think it's very important to be very selective with which fights you bet on. And this is not one of those fights to bet on. So that being said, who am I going to put my name on? You put a gun to my head and you tell me to pick someone. I'm actually going to slightly lean in favor of Dominick Reyes. And I'm going to agree with your point where he's probably the better fighter. If he doesn't face the touch of death, he probably has more tools to win this fight. So I'm going to essentially trust those tools. I'm going to essentially trust those tools with his back against the cage in terms of his record, in terms of protecting his ranking. And I think something's going to come out in him where he just performs at a level he's never performed at before, and he gets the job done in this fight. But again, really close one. I can actually see, I'm going to make a crazy prediction, crazy prop prediction. I can see Reyes winning via head kick. Prochazka leaves his head forward. He showboats. I can see a head kick coming, Doug Rose style, on Jiri Prochazka, and we'll see what happens there. But you know what? Enough of analyzing this fight. Let's take it to Vegas. Let's see what we can put together in terms of getting to this money, because that is what is more important. Why don't we start with some underdog picks that you're feeling throughout the entire card, if any?
I'll go with Dustin Jacoby.
Yeah, Dustin Jacoby plus 100. I definitely like that as an underdog pick as well. If I were to pick an underdog, I'm going to have to go with, of course, Dominick Reyes at plus 110. I feel like, again, he may just be the better fighter, although he may not end up winning. But that one is a coin flip in a lot of ways, and I think the odds reflect that. So 2 solid underdog picks there that have a chance. And in terms of parlay action or some favorite picks, what are you considering for the entire card?
I'm looking at Giga, Chikadze,
Yep.
Sean Strickland,
Yep.
Merab, Dvalishvili, and I'm going to add on to that Lookboonme.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Plus 279 on that. Mine is actually going to be very similar as well. So $100 will get you 379 on that one. For our bigger bettors, 250 is going to actually get you close to $1,000, $947.91 on that. Now, if I were to look at maybe some of my favorites, I definitely agree with Merab. I definitely agree with Giga. Those are probably my two favorite picks. I definitely agree with Sean Strickland as well. I'm actually going to add to that, rather than Lookboonme, I'm looking at Poliana Botelho. I feel pretty good about her chances in that fight versus Luana Carolina. $100 on that will return $441, whereas for our bigger bettors, $250 will return 1,100, just over 1,100. So again, a more, at least we're anticipating a more relaxed card than what UFC 261 was. But you know what? Do all that algorithmic stuff. Let's end it off on that note. All that algorithmic stuff is stuff that we would greatly appreciate. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, comment. Let's have some good conversation in the comments. What picks are you feeling? What underdog picks are you considering? Is there any parlay action that you want additional opinion on? Let us know in the comments, and we'll make sure in our replies we definitely specify who is the person replying to your comment, just so you can get that additional insight, that additional perspective. And of course, sharing this video is definitely a huge thing as well. We want this to be listened by as many people possible that need some additional breakdown for these UFC fights. On that note, let's sign off. He goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. This is Boxing MMA Picks. Finishing off our main card prediction for UFC Fight Night, Reyes versus Procházka, aka UFC Vegas 25. Let's get this money.
Let's get it.